Breaking news, police have arrested a man for the murder of 18-year-old Aonesty Selby.
The Williamsburg teen was reported missing last week. Police later found her body in Isle of Wight. The county sheriff's office says the murder suspect was arrested in Newport News last night.
In just 60 days, a relationship that began with promise ended in a brutal murder in a remote part of Virginia. You're about to hear a story that's as tragic as it is chilling. The kind of story that makes you ask, how could something so violent come from a relationship so new? What happened in those 2 months that turned a young man, someone she trusted, into her killer? And he almost got away with it. Nothing tied him to the crime scene. No surveillance cameras, no DNA, nothing. In fact, it's possible that Aonesty's body might have been lost forever, if not for one small clue she left behind just minutes before her death. A clue that would eventually lead investigators to the truth. This is the story of love, betrayal, and a man who did everything to cover his tracks. But before we begin, I want to thank you, my amazing viewers and subscribers, for your support through your likes, shares, and comments. Your engagements help make these stories more meaningful. If you're new here, be sure to hit that subscribe button and join our growing community of true crime enthusiasts. Now let's get started. Aonesty Selby had always been a shining light in the lives of those around her. Born and raised in the Outer Banks, she grew up in a small but loving family. Her life was simple, yet full of warmth. Aonesty's family was close-knit, with deep ties that ran through the very foundation of her upbringing. But as she got older, she knew she wanted more, a fresh start, new opportunities, and a place where she could truly blossom. At 18, she made the decision to move to Williamsburg, Virginia. Aonesty hoped to find a place where she could make her mark. She was sweet, helpful, and well-liked by everyone who knew her. Whether it was friends, family, or strangers, Aonesty had a way of making everyone feel comfortable, valued, and cared for. But her story took a sharp turn the day she met Darius McClelland. They crossed paths in the fall of 2022, and like many new relationships, it started off simple and lighthearted. Aonesty, full of optimism, was excited about the prospect of meeting someone new. McClelland, at 23, seemed to offer her just that, someone to share moments with. But as time passed, the lightheartedness began to fade, replaced with something much darker. Their relationship was quick to become on and off. 1 minute everything was fine, the next, they were distant. Aonesty had a good heart and tried to see the best in people, but there were signs that not everything was as it seemed. McClelland, although charming at first, began to show signs of jealousy. It wasn't long before those feelings began to boil over. He would question her about where she'd been, who she was talking to, and even accuse her of things she hadn't done. At first, Aonesty brushed it off. He's just protective, she thought. But deep down, she felt the shift. Those red flags were impossible to ignore. Jealousy that was once a passing moment began to feel more like a constant presence. And as their connection grew, so did the tension. McClelland's behavior became more erratic, and Aonesty found herself caught between a relationship that seemed to promise so much and a reality that was quickly turning toxic. It was January 11th, 2023, a day that seemed like any other. Aonesty woke up with plans to meet McClelland, unsure of what the day would hold, but thinking it would be just another evening spent together. At 1:18 p.m., she left her home in Williamsburg and headed out to meet him, just like they'd done before. McClelland, in his typical fashion, reached out with an offer. He sent Aonesty $30 via Cash App to cover her ride. The payment came through under the name Lucas Duke, another one of his aliases. Aonesty used the money to hire an Uber to McClelland's apartment, where they had spent time before. She arrived at his place a little after 1:45 p.m., not knowing that her life was about to take a tragic turn. What seemed like an ordinary afternoon quickly took a darker twist. After spending some time at McClellan's apartment, the two decided to take a drive, something they often did when they wanted to get away. McClellan borrowed his brother's 2021 Dodge Charger, and off they went, driving through the quiet roads of Virginia. They eventually ended up on a remote logging path in Isle of Wight County, far from the bustling city of Williamsburg. This was where the shift in Aonesty's gut feeling took place. She had been uneasy, but now it felt different, more real. At that moment, Aonesty did something that in hindsight would prove crucial. She sent her location to a friend. She didn't explain why, but there was something in her that told her she needed to be safe, to have a way for someone to know where she was, just in case. As the two sat in the car, they started talking, smoking marijuana to pass the time. But soon enough, an argument broke out between them. The conversation escalated quickly, and in the midst of that argument, McClellan, in a fit of rage, pulled out the Glock 9mm pistol he had taken from his brother. The conversation turned deadly. He shot Aonesty once, in the chest. One single shot that ended her life in an instant. What caused it to escalate so quickly? Was it impulsive, or had McClellan been planning something far darker all along? What started as a simple argument had now become a tragedy that no one could have predicted. Aonesty, who had trusted him, was now lying in a remote part of Virginia, her life taken by someone who once promised to care for her. The horror of the moment had barely sunk in before McClellan, in a panic, drove away, leaving her behind, hoping no one would ever tie him to the crime. But Aonesty had done one thing before her death. She'd left behind a small clue, one that would prove to be the turning point in the investigation. It was January 13th, 2023, and Aonesty Selby's family had not heard from her for 2 days. The silence was growing unbearable. At first, they tried to chalk it up to her just being busy, but as the hours stretched into an entire day without contact, the worry became palpable. By now they knew something was terribly wrong. Ebony Selby, Aonesty's aunt, felt the growing knot of anxiety in her chest. She couldn't sit back and wait for answers any longer. Without wasting time, she and other family members filed a missing person report with the police. Then something pivotal happened. Aonesty's friend had no idea a missing persons report had been filed, but when she heard about it, she decided to check her messages. That's when she saw it. Aonesty had sent her location 2 days ago, right before everything went quiet. The friend immediately contacted the family, saying, "Aonesty sent me her location 2 days ago. I didn't check it then, but I just saw it now." The family's hope was reignited. They now had a clear starting point. Ebony, desperate for answers, passed this crucial information on to the police, who quickly confirmed the new lead. They now had the precise location where Aonesty had been just before she vanished. However, when the family asked the police if they could search on their own, they were met with resistance. The authorities warned them not to search the area themselves, cautioning them about the dangers. "What if you get lost? What if something else happens to you?" they said. But Ebony and the family were determined. They couldn't sit back and wait any longer. Their instincts told them that time was of the essence. Out of desperation, they decided to go ahead with the search themselves, despite the warning. But the further they went, the more isolated the area became. They ventured deep into Isle of Wight County. Finally, about 4 miles outside Windsor, they came across a remote dirt logging path. There was no sign of anyone else, just the vast emptiness of the land. Then, as they made their way down the path, they saw it, the thing they had feared most, Aonesty's lifeless body. The shock and horror of that moment hit them all at once. It was as if time stopped. Ebony's heart sank and the reality of what had happened overwhelmed her. The body of the young woman they loved, who had so much life ahead of her, was now a lifeless shell.
In Isle of Wight County, police say someone found the body of a missing Williamsburg teenager. The family of Aonesty Selby reported her missing Friday morning, just days after her 18th birthday.
They had found her, but it was far too late.
Selby's body was found on a dirt logging path near the Blue Ridge Trail in Windsor on Friday, according to the Isle of Wight County Sheriff's Office. Officials there say an autopsy found Aonesty had been shot. Now detectives as well as family members want to know how she got to the trail and what's her connection to the Windsor area.
Once the family made their grim discovery, the authorities took over. The Isle of Wight Sheriff's Office and Newport News Police Department began to piece together the crime, though it wasn't easy. The scene had no surveillance footage, no obvious evidence, and no eyewitnesses. But the breakthrough came from something Aonesty had left behind: her phone. The phone's location data was the key. It showed investigators exactly where Aonesty had been, how she had moved, and, most crucially, the last moments of her life. Using the phone records, police were able to confirm the timeline of McClelland's movements on January 11th. They learned that McClelland had borrowed his brother's 2021 Dodge Charger and taken Aonesty to a secluded spot in Isle of Wight County. It was there that the tragedy had occurred, on a quiet logging path far from the eyes of the world. But the evidence didn't end with the phone. Police soon discovered that McClelland had taken his brother's Glock 9mm pistol from his home before the killing. After the murder, he attempted to sell the weapon, desperate to remove any trace of what he had done. But his efforts to cover his tracks didn't go as planned. The gun was eventually found, and it linked McClelland directly to the crime scene. As the investigation progressed, McClelland's story began to unravel. Interviews with him revealed his confession. He had panicked after shooting Aonesty, leaving her behind in that lonely place, hoping no one would connect him to the murder. But his attempt to get away with it was short-lived. 3 days after the family's discovery, McClelland was arrested. The police had enough evidence to charge him with second-degree murder and use of a firearm in the commission of a felony. The truth had come to light, and Aonesty's family finally had the answers they had been searching for. Through determination and the efforts of law enforcement, the pieces of the puzzle came together. McClelland's lies and attempts to cover his tracks had failed, and though Aonesty's life was tragically cut short, justice was on its way.
And Darius McClelland told our investigators that he and Aonesty had been dating off and on for the past 2 months, and that from time to time she would come to his apartment or he would meet her in Newport News. On the night of January the 11th, she was at his apartment. When his brother got home from work, he asked to borrow the car. They then left, went to a store, and then, as was commonplace for them two, during their times together, they would look for a location to hang out and smoke marijuana. According to McClelland, they decided to drive to Isle of Wight County, where a location was found off of Iron Mine Springs Road, which is another road that's adjacent to the tract of timber where her body was found. According to McClelland, they drove up the path, they spent some time talking, smoking marijuana, and at some point an argument began over their relationship, and Darius tells investigators that he had the firearm on his person or in his hand at the time, and during the argument he fired the weapon, striking Aonesty. He says he then panicked, left the area, and went back to Newport News. Subsequent to his arrest, and Darius McClelland is being held at the Western Tidewater Regional Jail on a no-bond status.
But things weren't as straightforward as they seemed. As the case moved forward, questions arose about McClelland's mental state. Was he fit to stand trial? This became a central point in the legal proceedings. Competency hearings were scheduled, where a clinical psychologist was appointed to assess McClelland's mental condition. His defense team argued that he was not mentally competent to understand the charges or participate in his defense. In August 2023, the court determined that McClelland was incompetent to stand trial. But just months later, by February 2024, the situation shifted. McClelland was declared competent to face the charges after further evaluations. The emotional toll of these delays weighed heavily on Aonesty's family. They had already suffered the loss of a beloved daughter, niece, and sister, and now they had to endure the uncertainty of McClelland's legal status. Each delay added to the frustration, making it clear that the road to justice would not be quick. The arraignment was pushed back multiple times. McClelland's defense attorney changed in the midst of the legal proceedings, further delaying the process. His new attorney, Stephen Plott, was appointed after McClelland's previous lawyer, Antoinette Bacon, withdrew. And when the trial finally came into view, McClelland pleaded not guilty to all charges, despite the overwhelming evidence against him. It was another moment of tension for Aonesty's family, who had to watch as McClelland, with no remorse, attempted to escape responsibility for his actions. Aonesty's family found themselves caught in a legal battle that was dragging on longer than they ever expected. Each delay brought new frustrations. The emotional weight of waiting for justice, knowing that McClelland was sitting in jail while they grieved their daughter, was almost unbearable. But they stayed strong, knowing that justice for Aonesty was their only hope. The grief felt by Aonesty's family after her death was immeasurable. The pain of losing someone so young, so full of potential, left a deep scar on their hearts. Her parents, Ebony, and other loved ones struggled to make sense of the tragedy. Aonesty had only just turned 18, her life barely beginning when it was abruptly cut short. The person they loved was gone, taken by someone she had trusted. The loss was felt far beyond her immediate family. The community of Williamsburg, where Aonesty had lived, also mourned her passing. She had touched many lives, and the sadness of her death spread quickly. Friends and neighbors rallied together to honor her memory, offering support to her grieving family. In the days following her death, there was an outpouring of love and sympathy as people reflected on how Aonesty had made a difference in their lives, no matter how briefly they had known her. In her community's efforts to honor her, a memorial service was held. Candles were lit, flowers were placed, and music played to celebrate her life. It was a bittersweet moment, a reminder of the bright future that had been taken away. The memorial not only paid tribute to Aonesty, but also brought the community closer together in the face of such a senseless tragedy.
Yeah, Kurt, dozens gathered tonight at Yorktown Beach to honor the life of Aonesty Selby, taken far too soon. Friends and family gathered to commemorate 18-year-old Aonesty Selby. They played music, set out flowers, and candles were lit, illuminating the mourning faces of the loved ones left behind. The Williamsburg teen's body was found the day she was reported missing on a dirt logging path in a remote area of Isle of Wight County. And tonight, those who gathered grieving the huge emptiness now left in their hearts.
Though Aonesty's life was tragically short, her legacy lived on. Her family kept her memory alive, speaking about her dreams, her laughter, and the kindness that defined her. In the wake of the pain, there was a desire to honor Aonesty's spirit by making sure that her death was not in vain. But as much as the community wanted to focus on the good she brought into the world, there were larger questions that couldn't be ignored. This case raised difficult, important questions about jealousy, domestic violence, and the dangers of controlling relationships. McClelland's violent actions were a tragic example of how unchecked jealousy and toxic behaviors can escalate. The signs had been there: his possessiveness, his controlling behavior. But how many other women, like Aonesty, find themselves in relationships where their partner's actions cross a line. This case revealed just how fragile relationships can be when one person feels entitled to control the other. It served as a stark reminder that we need to be more aware of the warning signs and know how to protect ourselves from such destructive forces. As McClellan's trial approaches, Aonesty's family holds on to the hope that justice will finally be served. They understand that no matter the outcome, it won't bring Aonesty back, but it will be a step toward closure. The pain of her loss will never go away, but they believe that holding McClellan accountable for his actions will honor her life, and perhaps, in some way, prevent future tragedies from occurring. For now, the fight for justice continues. McClellan's trial will take place in the coming months, and for Aonesty's family, it's their last chance to see justice done. They've already lost so much. Now, all they can do is hope that the court will deliver what Aonesty truly deserves: justice. And that brings us to the end of Aonesty Selby's story, one that leaves us questioning how something so violent could come from a relationship that began with promise. What do you think drove McClellan to take such a tragic step? Could Aonesty have seen the warning signs sooner? Should more have been done to intervene? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. We want to hear what you think about this case, about the dangers of toxic relationships, and how we can all be more aware. If this case left an impact on you, don't forget that there are more stories just like this on the channel. Cases that are haunting, complex, and deserving of justice. Be sure to subscribe, like, and share this video. It's the best way to keep these important stories from being forgotten. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Stay safe and aware.